My son changed the locks. While I was in the hospital, he didn't know I still owned everything. Asterisk, asterisk. The first thing I noticed wasn't that my key didn't fit. It was the fresh paint. Someone had painted my front door while I was lying in a hospital bed, wondering whether I'd ever make it home again. I stood there with my overnight bag in one hand and my hospital discharge papers in the other. My fingers trembled as I tried the key again. Nothing. I turned it once, twice. The lock wouldn't move. For a moment, I honestly thought I was standing in front of the wrong house. Then I looked at the old oak tree my wife and I planted 32 years earlier. The porch swing I built after our granddaughter was born. The small crack in the driveway I'd promised myself I'd repair every spring. No, this was my home, so why couldn't I get inside? Before I tell you what happened next, welcome to the channel. If you enjoy real-life stories about family, betrayal, justice, and second chances, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now let me tell you the day I realized that losing your health is painful, but losing your trust in your own child hurts even more. My name is Martin Schneider. I'm 68 years old. For nearly 4 decades, I worked as a carpenter in a small town outside Heidelberg. My hands built kitchens, staircases, roofs, and furniture that will probably outlive me. I never became wealthy. But every paycheck meant something. Every overtime shift, every sore muscle, every winter morning spent working before sunrise. That money paid for one thing above everything else. Our home. Not a mansion, not a luxury estate, just a simple 2-story house where my wife Karen and I raised our son Daniel. To most people, it looked ordinary. To me, it held an entire lifetime. The pencil marks on the laundry room wall still measured Daniel's height from first grade through high school. The garage still smelled faintly of engine oil because we rebuilt his first motorcycle together. The attic still held boxes of Christmas decorations. Karen refused to throw away because every ornament had a story. People think houses are made of wood and brick. They're wrong. Homes are made of memories. That's why they're so easy to steal, even before anyone takes the keys. Karen passed away 6 years ago after a short battle with cancer. When you've been married 43 years, silence becomes something you can actually hear. The television stayed off most evenings. Her favorite chair remained exactly where she'd left it. Some mornings I still found myself making 2 cups of coffee before remembering there was only one person left to drink it. Daniel worried about me. At least, that's what I believed. He started visiting more often. Every Sunday, sometimes on Wednesdays too. He'd mow the lawn before I even asked. He'd replace light bulbs, take out the trash, bring groceries. Dad, he'd always say with a smile, "Mom would kill me if I let you do all this by yourself." I'd laugh. "So she's still watching us?" "Definitely," he'd answer. "And she's probably judging my cooking." Those little conversations made the house feel alive again. I needed that more than I realized. Looking back now, I can't tell whether Daniel was genuinely helping me or quietly learning every detail of my daily routine. He knew where I kept the spare keys. He knew which drawer held my banking papers. He knew when the property taxes were due. He knew the names of my neighbors. He even knew which lawyer had handled Karen's estate. At the time, I thought that was responsible. Today, I see it differently. About 8 months before everything fell apart, I suffered a mild heart attack while repairing a fence for my neighbor. The doctors told me I had been lucky. "Your heart gave you a warning," one of them said. "You need to slow down." That sentence changed my life. Not because of my heart, but because of what it made Daniel do. Almost overnight, he became the perfect son. He insisted on driving me to every appointment. He picked up my prescriptions. He started paying my utility bills online. He even organized my paperwork into neat folders. "You've done enough for everyone else," he told me one afternoon while sorting envelopes at my kitchen table. "It's my turn to take care of you." If you've ever been a parent, you know how those words feel. You don't hear manipulation. You hear love. You hear gratitude. You hear proof that maybe, just maybe, you did something right while raising your child. So I let my guard down, not all at once, little by little. One favor became another. One errand became a routine. One unlocked door became complete trust. I never imagined that trust would become the most valuable thing I'd ever lose. 3 months later, I woke up in the middle of the night with crushing pain in my chest. Within minutes, I was in an ambulance. The flashing lights reflected against the windows as a paramedic kept telling me to stay awake. I remember thinking only one thing: I hope I get to sleep in my own bed again. I had no idea. Someone else was already making plans for that bed. When I opened my eyes the next morning, everything around me was white. White walls, white ceiling, white sheets. For a few seconds I couldn't remember where I was. Then I heard the steady beeping of the heart monitor. The hospital. A nurse noticed I was awake and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Schneider. You gave us quite a scare." I tried to sit up, but a sharp ache spread across my chest. "Easy," she said gently. "The doctors want you resting." Resting. That word would follow me for weeks. Later that afternoon, Daniel walked into my room carrying a small paper bag from my favorite bakery. "I brought you fresh rolls," he said with a smile. It looked like the same smile I'd known my entire life. He placed the bag on the bedside table before pulling a chair closer. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," he chuckled softly. "You'll be home before you know it." At the time, those words gave me hope. Now I wonder whether they were meant to calm me or keep me from asking questions. The doctors decided to keep me under observation longer than expected. My blood pressure was unstable. They wanted additional tests. 1 week became 2, then 3. Daniel visited almost every day. Sometimes he arrived carrying groceries for when I returned home. Other times, he brought my mail. "Nothing important," he'd say, while flipping through the envelopes. "I already paid the electric bill." The insurance company sent another statement. "Oh, and I renewed your internet contract." At first, I appreciated the help. Recovering from heart problems leaves you exhausted. Even reading a stack of letters felt like hard work. So I trusted him. After all, he was my son. One afternoon, he pulled a folder from his backpack. "I need your signature on a couple of forms." I adjusted my glasses. "What kind of forms?" "Hospital insurance paperwork." He handed me a pen. I glanced through every page. Most of it looked routine. Still, years earlier, my lawyer had given me one piece of advice after Karin passed away. Asterisk, never sign anything important when you're tired, emotional, or under medication. Asterisk, I could almost hear his voice, so I pushed the folder back. "I'll wait until Thomas looks at it." Daniel's smile faded for the briefest moment. "It's just paperwork, Dad." "I know. You trust Thomas more than me?" "It isn't about trust. It's about being careful." For a second, disappointment crossed his face. Then he forced another smile. "Fair enough." He packed the folder away without another word. Looking back, that was probably the first time his plan failed. The following week, Daniel became even more helpful. Too helpful. He insisted on collecting my prescriptions himself. He spoke to the nurses before I could. He even answered questions that doctors directed at me. "When your father returns home," one doctor asked, "will someone be staying with him?" "I've already arranged everything," Daniel answered before I could speak. The doctor nodded. "Excellent. I remember feeling grateful. Now I wonder why no one asked what times I wanted." A few days before my discharge, Daniel called while I was eating breakfast. "Dad, I replaced the old mailbox." "Why?" "It was rusty. I liked that mailbox." He laughed. "You'll like the new one better." Then, he added something that barely caught my attention at the time. "I've made a few improvements around the house." "What kind of improvements?" "Oh, just little things." I didn't think much about it. Daniel had always enjoyed fixing things, or at least, that's what I believed. The morning I was discharged felt like a new beginning. A volunteer wheeled me through the hospital lobby. Fresh air filled my lungs for the first time in weeks. It smelled like autumn. Leaves covered the sidewalks. People hurried past carrying coffee cups, talking on their phones, living ordinary lives. I couldn't wait to return to mine. The taxi driver helped load my bag into the trunk. "Home?" he asked. I smiled. Finally. During the drive, I imagined making coffee in my kitchen, sitting in Karin's favorite chair, watching birds gather in the backyard. Simple things suddenly felt priceless. As we turned onto my street, something immediately felt different. 2 unfamiliar cars sat in my driveway. I frowned. Maybe Daniel had friends visiting. The taxi stopped. I paid the driver. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I noticed new flower pots beside the front steps. Different curtains hung in the living room windows. The old welcome mat Karin had bought years ago was gone. I stood there, confused. Maybe Daniel redecorated, I whispered to myself. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my key, slid it into the lock. It stopped halfway. I frowned, tried again, nothing. I pulled the key out and stared at it. It was the same key I'd carried for over 30 years. So, why didn't it fit? I was still trying when the front door slowly opened. A young woman, no older than 30, looked at me politely. She smiled the way people smile at strangers. "Can I help you?" For a moment, I honestly thought I had walked into someone else's life. "My name is Martin," I said quietly. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I live here." Her smile disappeared. She glanced over her shoulder. Then she looked back at me. "I'm sorry. We've been renting this house since last week." Every word felt like a punch to the chest. "Renting?" "Yes." She hesitated. "The owner gave us the keys." I swallowed hard. "Who?" Before she could answer, I heard familiar footsteps coming down the hallway. "Daniel." He walked to the doorway, saw me standing there, with my hospital bag still in my hand.
And froze for a brief second. Neither of us spoke. Then he took a slow breath and said words that would change everything. "Dad, we need to talk." I looked from Daniel to the young couple standing behind him. Neither of them looked like criminals. In fact, they looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. The woman lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "We didn't know." Daniel interrupted her. "Emily, could you give us a minute?" She nodded, gently closed the door, and disappeared back inside. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The November wind carried dry leaves across the driveway. Finally, I broke the silence. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, just hear me out. I've been hearing you out for 36 years. His eyes dropped to the ground. "I didn't steal your house. No, no." "Then why am I standing outside while strangers are living inside my home?" He let out a slow breath. I was trying to protect it. I couldn't help laughing, not because anything was funny. Because it was the only thing stopping me from shouting, "Protect it." The house was sitting empty. I was in the hospital. You could have stayed there longer. What? "The doctors weren't sure when you'd come home." I stared at him. "So your solution was to rent my house." "I needed money." "There it is." The words slipped out before I could stop them. "There it is." Daniel looked away. "My business is drowning, Dad. I know. The bank refused another loan. I know. I've got employees depending on me. I know. And Emma." His voice cracked. "Emma deserves a better life than I can give her." For a second, I saw the frightened little boy I used to comfort after nightmares. But sympathy couldn't erase what he'd done, so you decided to gamble with my home. I was going to tell you when, as soon as you got better. I *am* better. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and handed me a folded sheet of paper. It was a lease agreement, 6 months, paid in advance. The rent had already been deposited into an account. I recognized the last 4 digits immediately. My checking account. My hands tightened around the paper. "You used my account. I intended to replace every cent. That isn't the point." "I wasn't stealing. You made decisions that weren't yours to make." His jaw tightened. "I've spent my whole life watching you put everyone else first. I was trying to save my family." "And what about mine?" He blinked. "You are my family." "No, Daniel." My voice remained calm. "Family doesn't lock family out." Those words seemed to hit him harder than anything else I'd said. For the first time, guilt appeared on his face. Real guilt, not the kind people perform, the kind they can't hide. But by then, something inside me had changed. Not anger, clarity. I realized I couldn't solve this by arguing in the driveway. I needed facts, not emotions. "I'll be speaking with Thomas, my lawyer." Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "That isn't necessary." It became necessary the moment my key stopped working. He took a step closer. "Dad, please, no, I can fix this. Can you?" He hesitated. You've already signed contracts." "Yes, you've collected rent. Yes, you changed the locks. Yes, and you never asked me once." Silence. That silence answered every question. I picked up my overnight bag. "I'll find somewhere else to stay tonight." His eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I clearly do." As I turned toward the sidewalk, he called after me. "I never wanted to hurt you." I stopped walking. Without looking back, I answered quietly. Neither did I that evening. I checked into a small family-owned hotel less than 15 minutes away. The receptionist noticed my hospital bracelet before she asked for my ID. "Rough week, you could say that." She smiled kindly. "I hope tomorrow is better. So do I." My room overlooked a quiet parking lot, nothing special. A small bed, a wooden desk, a single lamp, but it was peaceful. For the first time all day, no one expected anything from me. I placed Karin's framed photograph on the bedside table. I carried it everywhere after she passed. Looking at her smile, I whispered words I hadn't spoken aloud in years. "I don't know what to do." Of course, there was no answer, only silence, but sometimes silence gives you room to think. I replayed every conversation Daniel and I had shared over the past year, every favor. Every document, every visit. One memory suddenly stood out. About 4 months earlier, Daniel had asked an unusual question while helping me clean the garage. "Dad, if you ever decided to move, what would happen to the house?" At the time I'd laughed. "I'm not going anywhere." He smiled. "I know, I was just curious." Back then it seemed harmless. Now it felt like the first move in a game I never realized we were playing. The next morning I called Thomas Berger before 8 o'clock. He answered on the second ring. "Martin, I need your help." His tone changed immediately. "What happened?" I looked out the hotel window. "My son has done something I never thought he was capable of." There was a brief silence. Then Thomas said 4 words that gave me hope. "Come to my office." I had no idea that by the end of that meeting, we would uncover something far bigger than a changed lock. We would discover that the house was only the beginning. Thomas Berger had been my lawyer for more than 25 years. More importantly, he had been my friend. When I walked into his office, he took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Not even an hour." He motioned toward the chair across from his desk. "Start from the beginning." I told him everything. The hospital, the new locks, the tenants, the lease, the rent, Daniel's explanation. I left nothing out. Thomas listened without interrupting. He simply took notes. When I finished, he folded his hands and looked directly at me. "I need you to answer one question honestly. Anything. Do you want to protect your son? Or do you want the truth?" The question caught me off guard. I thought those were the same thing. They aren't always. I leaned back in the chair. "I don't want revenge. I want to understand." Thomas nodded. "Good, because if we're going to do this properly, we follow facts, not emotions." For the next 2 hours, we reviewed every document connected to my finances. Every bank statement, every insurance payment, every utility bill. At first, nothing looked unusual. Then Thomas frowned. "Martin, what is it? Did you authorize a new mailing address 3 months ago?" "No." He turned the monitor toward me. According to the bank's records, duplicate statements had been redirected to a private post office box. Not permanently, only temporarily. Just long enough that I never saw the originals while I was in the hospital. "Can we find out who requested it?" I asked. Thomas nodded slowly. "We can. But something tells me we're going to find more." By lunchtime, the picture had become much clearer. Daniel hadn't emptied my accounts. He hadn't forged my signature. He hadn't transferred ownership of the house. Instead, he had done something far more calculated. He had slowly placed himself in control of everything surrounding my daily life. Mail. Appointments, bills, maintenance, phone calls. If someone needed information about me, they reached him first. It was as though I had gradually disappeared from my own life without realizing it. Thomas closed another folder. This wasn't impulsive. No, it was planned. I stared at the papers spread across the desk. "I keep asking myself where I went wrong." Thomas shook his head. "Don't do that. I'm his father, and he's an adult. Those are 2 different responsibilities." His words stayed with me. That afternoon, Thomas suggested something unexpected. "Before we take legal action, I want to meet the tenants." The tenants, yes, they may be victims too. It hadn't even crossed my mind. I was so focused on Daniel that I'd forgotten another family had been pulled into this mess. We drove back to my neighborhood together. When we arrived, Daniel's car wasn't there. Thomas knocked on the front door. A few seconds later, the same young woman opened it. She recognized me immediately. "I'm so sorry," she said before I could speak. "My husband and I had no idea." Thomas introduced himself calmly. "We're not here to blame anyone. We just need to ask a few questions." She invited us inside. Walking through my own living room as a guest felt surreal. Most of my furniture was still there, so were Karin's photographs, but something felt different. The house no longer felt like mine. It felt borrowed. The young couple introduced themselves as Emily and Josh. Both were teachers. Both had recently moved from another city after accepting new jobs. "We found the rental online," Josh explained. The price seemed fair. Daniel said his father had moved into assisted living. I looked down at the floor. Assisted living. I had never even considered leaving my home. Emily disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a folder. We kept copies of everything. Thomas carefully reviewed the documents, every page, every signature. Then he looked at me. "Martin. What? Your name isn't on this lease." "It isn't." He turned the last page around. The landlord wasn't listed as Martin Schneider. It wasn't even listed as Daniel Schneider. Instead, the property owner was described as *Rhine Valley Property Management, LLC ***. I frowned. I've never heard of that company. Neither have I, Thomas replied. He immediately searched the business registry on his laptop. A minute later, he found it. The company had been created only 5 months earlier. One director, one registered address, one shareholder. Daniel Schneider. I felt every ounce of strength leave my body. He hadn't simply rented my house. He had created an entire company to make himself look like the legal owner. Thomas quietly closed the laptop. This changes everything. Emily looked horrified. Are we going to lose the house? Thomas answered before I could. No, not immediately. You signed the lease in good faith. We'll make sure you're treated fairly. The relief on their faces was immediate, and strangely, seeing them relax gave me peace. Because for the first time since leaving the hospital, I knew exactly who the real problem was. It wasn't the young couple. It wasn't a paperwork mistake. It wasn't bad communication. It was my own son, and for the first time in my life, I stopped asking how to protect him. I started asking how to stop him. As Thomas and I walked back toward the car, my phone vibrated. A text message from Daniel. Dad, please don't involve lawyers. We can still fix this as a family. I read it twice before locking the screen. Thomas looked at me. What are you thinking? I slipped the phone into my pocket. I'm thinking. He just realized I'm no longer fighting with my heart. I'm fighting with the truth.